Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you for tuning in once again. And in today's video, I would like us to talk about the preparation for the GCC Factories Law Exam. As we all know that in South Africa, if you want to get a GCC, which is also called the Government Competency Certificate, you need to pass 2 exams. One of those exams is the law exam. That's the one we're going to be talking about today. If you want to know what is a GCC, I've made another video. You can just check on this playlist. That's where you can learn more about what is a GCC, what is the application process, and so on. Okay, let's focus on the business of the day. So the GCC Law Exam is based on the Occupational Health and Safety Act of South Africa. It's an act that was passed in 1993. So the act, there's a part where there are definitions of what the act, and it explains the different duties and responsibilities. And there's also the part 2 of the act, which is the regulations. So I don't have the book in front of me. I just have another one that is used for mining industry. This one is Mine Health and Safety Act, but the one for factories is going to be written Occupational Health and Safety Act. I only have a PDF version of it. You can also prepare using the PDF version, but if you like, you can just buy a hard copy and then use it to prepare. But what is important, there's a part where the act is being explained, all the laws that are relevant to the occupational health and safety of people, and then there are regulations that are supporting the act, or the regulations that are more specific to the different fields or different subcategories. Okay, so now let me take just the exam that we wrote last year, because I want this session to be as practical as possible. Okay, this is the exam that we wrote in November 2025. It has followed a similar format as other exams. So I want us to use that approach when we prepare for the exam. Okay, first of all, for the last 10 years, let me just say I checked the last 10 years, it may be even more years. The way the exam has been set up, the first 2 questions are based on the act, meaning there's a part that covers all the definitions of the act, and then it covers as well the duties of the employer and the employees. And then question 2 covers guidelines that are coming from the act as well on how to appoint safety reps, safety representatives in a working environment. So those regulations, they just explain how many employees you need to have, and depending on the type of work, is it office work, is it factory work, is it hazardous work, all those regulations are covered in the act. So that section is 20 marks. Most of the, like I said, the last 10 years, they were asking those 2 parts of the law. So it's a part that I think is very important to cover. Read that part of the act, understand the definitions, understand the duties of the employer, understand the duties of the employees, and understand the guidelines when it comes to the appointment of safety reps, safety committees, and everything related to that, because that's a very large portion. If you know that you've mastered that part of the act, at least you can aim. That's how I was doing it. I was saying, okay, fine, this section is about 20 marks, but I'm aiming at least to get 15, because sometimes you may forget something or miss something on your preparation, but at least you need to get good marks in that section, because it always appears. All right. The second part of the second important part that I think we should cover now is the definitions. Okay, let me put it this way. Apart from the act, you're going to have regulations, and there's just too many regulations. I'm going to put the definitions for the last so that you watch the video till the end. But let me just explain it. The regulations are divided into 4 subcategories. You have electrical regulations, you have mechanical regulations, you have got general regulations, general safety regulations, and then you have health regulations. Okay. So I think from what I've observed again is that the mechanical regulations have got a very large weight, and majority of the time they will appear. So under mechanical regulations, you get regulations for driven machinery regulations, which talks about rollers, presses, machine guarding, moving conveyors, all those kind of equipment. So it's called driven machinery regulation. It's a complete regulation. That regulation, you need to cover it, you need to understand it, because it appears in most exams. It's part of mechanical. The other one that usually comes a lot is the pressure equipment regulations. They are talking about boilers, pressure vessels, how often do they need to be inspected, who needs to inspect them internally or externally, those kind of things. The other regulation under that one is the GMR, General Machinery Regulation. It's what governs the appointment of the GMR 2.1, which most people who study GCC, they study it to be appointed as GMR 2.1 appointees. So it falls under mechanical regulations, and it's important to know that one. Okay, there may be other regulations that also go with mechanical regulations. For example, lifting equipment, cranes, slings, and so on. I would say these are the regulations you don't want to miss, or you don't want to just ignore. Just make sure you start there. Okay, let's move on to the next part. The second subcategory is electrical regulations. There are only 2 regulations covered there. And what I've observed there is that they usually ask one of the 2, or let me say that portion is usually 10 marks. In some years, they will ask the electrical machinery regulations, EMR. In other years, they will ask the electrical installation regulations. But it's good to know both, because under electrical is only 2. The electrical machinery regulation just explains things like substations, electrical machinery, how it should be installed, and there's also some definitions there, and there's also some guidelines and rules in terms of inspection and frequency of inspections and all of that. Then the electrical installation regulation, which is part 2 or under the electrical regulations, it talks about installations, things like installation electrician. Why do we need to issue a certificate of compliance, and who issues it? What is an electrical contractor? What's all the regulations that govern that? So that's a second regulation. Okay, let's move. The 2 other subcategories. Let me start with health regulations. Health regulations cover things like exposure to asbestos, exposure to lead, exposure of employees to noise, exposure of employees to economics hazards, and also environmental hazards, and so on. Hazardous substances, but it's more about the health of employees and the thing that they get exposed to. It also covers things like biological monitoring, the thing of taking employees to medicals, annual medicals, and so on. So that is health regulations. You can, again, I won't know the exact amount of marks that are there, but they always appear. But because it's many regulations under the health, they usually shuffle them. This year they will ask this, or sometimes they ask 5 marks from one regulation, another 5 marks from another regulation. So it's not as strong as mechanical regulations, whereby it's almost guaranteed that you're gonna get the question. But it's good as well to cover them. But I would put them as third priority. We say mechanical is priority 1 on the regulations, electrical is priority 2, and then you take health regulations. And the last one is the general safety regulations. These ones, they cover things like construction regulations, appointment of supervisors in the construction site, and how you govern all of that. There's also general safety regulations under it, where they talk about ladders, warning signs, emergency exit, little bit about the lighting and all of that. So it's just general safety regulations, and there's also general administration regulations. And that means those are things like incident investigation, record keeping of those incidents, and all of that. It's a lot of regulations, to be honest, but now you want to be a bit strategic when you study, because it can be overwhelming to study the whole book or to look at the book in the beginning. But if you know how you're going to split it and how you're going to divide it, at least now you know how to approach it. Okay. All right. And so that's how I approached the exam. That's how I prepared for exam. So now we are towards the end of my video. Let me talk about the definitions. What I noticed when you prepare for these exams is that the definitions in the entire exam now, they usually are close to 20 marks. More than 15, around 20 marks. So even if you don't get to cover some of the regulations, it's very important to just try and practice the definitions. Because maybe let's say you start preparing closer to the exam week and then you don't get to facilities regulations. Then at least you can cover just the definitions, because the definitions are there. If you take the questions of the last 10 years, that's about 30 questions. Oh, sorry, that's about 20 questions, because we've got 2 questions every year. You take the last 10 years, you look at the definitions only. You just look at the definition and you try to memorize it. And you try to write definitions the way they are written in the book. I know most people, it's easy to paraphrase. And it's easy to just rewrite the regulation in the way that you understand it. It's okay. But try as much as possible to keep the regulations very close to what they are, very close to the way they are written in the book. Because we don't know the people who mark our papers. I've read somewhere on it's basically a syllabus, but it's for instruction rules, whereby they said when we write these exams, they are testing your knowledge, your understanding and application. So there will be times whereby the question is just testing you how you apply it. That's why now it's important that you just understand it so deeply that if they give you a scenario, you know how to apply the law. But there's a part of the exam whereby they're testing your knowledge. So they expect you to write. They will be looking for some keywords in your answers. So even if maybe you have a different understanding, it's preferable to write it as close as possible to the way it's written in the law. That's what I would encourage people to do when you are studying it. Okay. So like I said, the definitions are worth 20 marks. So if you can just dedicate a day in your preparation, or 2 days, say today and tomorrow, I'm going to be focusing on definitions. I start from question 1 till question 10. I just focus on definition, even if I don't cover the entire regulation. Under pressure equipment, whatever they usually ask and they ask me to define, I know how to define it, and I can define it as close as possible to the law. Okay. Other regulations, they need application, obviously, and most people who attempt GCC exams are already in the workplace, so they have experience. So you can relate to some of the laws. It's okay, in my workplace, this is how we apply it. This is how we elect safety reps. Then you take that, you have got the practical application of the knowledge, which is an advantage. Okay, yeah. So another thing, the guys who studied electrical engineering, and especially those who did wireman's license, which is paper 1 and paper 2, they have an advantage when it comes to electrical regulations, because those regulations, they've covered them during their preparation for paper 1 and paper 2. Okay, that's it, guys. So let me just try to recap. So I said you focus on the act, which is about 20 marks. You focus on the definition, which is also definitions, which is about 20 marks. And then you prioritize mechanical regulations, because that's where most marks, or the heavy part of the marks, that's where there's consistency in the way they ask. That's where there's repeatability. They usually repeat those questions, or it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get a question either on driven machinery, or if it's not driven machinery, there will be a pressure equipment question. If it's not pressure equipment, there will be lifting equipment question. And then if it's not lifting equipment, there will be a general machinery regulation question. Out of the 4 regulations that I've mentioned there, at least 2 will be there. In some cases, they will just ask all 4. So that means mechanical regulations have got a huge weight. And then you move over to electrical, only 2 regulations. I would say that one is the easiest for someone with electrical background. But even if you've got mechanical background, invest some time. Try to understand those two regulations, and then you know that you have 10 marks for electrical because they will ask one of the two. Okay? Health regulations, you can relate. It's health. So it was talking about lead, asbestos, noise, economics, environment, hazardous substances, hazardous chemicals, and so on. And then the last one is general regulation, which is construction, general safety, general administration regulations. There's facilities regulations, which they talk about change rooms, they talk about canteens, they talk about toilets, bathrooms in the work environment, and so on. Okay, guys, I hope you gained some valuable knowledge in this video. And if you have got any questions or clarity seeking questions, or there's a video that you would like me to do in this GCC series, please leave something by the comments. If you would like to check my other videos, check under the playlist. And also please do like the video, do share the video with anyone who will find it beneficial, and also please subscribe to the channel so that we may grow.